Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. For 16 years, I was the girl behind the numbers, the strategist in the shadows, the late-night fixer. I wasn't just an employee at Tech, I was its pulse. I joined when the company was a risky startup with more caffeine than capital. Now, we were in skyscrapers. I was the senior director of strategic partnerships, and I had just signed a deal that would change everything. The contract was with Rethos Global, a tech juggernaut. We had brokered a licensing agreement worth millions, and the best part? The deal included a substantial equity swap. Our valuation skyrocketed overnight. My name was all over the internal memos. The board decided to celebrate with a black tie event. There was an orchestra, endless champagne, and praise so thick I felt I could drown in it. To Lola, the woman who brought Rethos to our doorstep, my boss Jeremy toasted. He kissed my cheek for the cameras. I wore a sapphire gown. I smiled. I clinked glasses. I laughed. But when I got home, all I wanted was sleep. I peeled off the dress, crawled into bed, and let the exhaustion take me. At 5 a.m., my phone buzzed. One message. You're fired, effective immediately. No salutation, no explanation, just 5 words. I stared at the screen, then quietly deleted the message. My hands didn't tremble. My breath didn't hitch. I got out of bed, brewed coffee, and opened my laptop. Out of habit, I tried to log into the system. It let me in. They hadn't revoked my access. That was their mistake. In the silence of dawn, I sat at my kitchen counter and stared at the dashboard. I still had access to every file, every contract, every back-channel correspondence. All of it, including the Rethos agreement. My agreement. I took a deep breath. They thought they could erase me with a single message. But what they didn't know was that I had built the bones of this company. I had watched Jeremy stumble through every board meeting until I saved him with data. I had held this empire together with email threads and patience. And now they had given me one final gift. A backdoor. What came next wasn't revenge. It was correction. By evening, Tech's stock had plummeted 40%, and that was only the beginning. 16 years. That's how long I gave to them. Days that blurred into nights, vacations cut short, relationships lost to ambition. And still, the moment that 5 a.m. text landed on my phone, none of that mattered. You're fired. Just that. No explanation, no gratitude. I deleted it without replying. What was the point? But instead of falling apart, I sat up in bed and stared at the screen. My system access still worked. And that's when the memories began flooding in. We weren't always a Fortune 500 darling. No, it started with 3 of us crammed into a dusty rented office above a coffee shop. The place always smelled like burnt espresso and sugar syrup. Julian, Raj, and me. They were the vision and the pitch, slick talkers in blazers 2 sizes too big. I was the backbone, the spreadsheet queen, the one who made sense of their chaos. We didn't even have a real name at first, just Startup Doc Final, Real Bapskessel Sex, and a Dream. I still remember that first grant, $15,000 from an angel investor who didn't know better. I used every penny to build what I called the spine, a modular finance infrastructure that could scale with unpredictable growth. At the time, I was just a 23-year-old code nerd with a bad haircut and no sleep schedule. But what I built? It worked. It worked so well that we didn't even realize when the business outgrew our office, until we were hiring a dozen people a week and I was no longer the only one sleeping under the desk. And now? They act like none of that ever happened. My name never made it onto the public documents. Raj called me our quiet genius in interviews, but when it came to stock options and recognition, I was invisible. Except, I wasn't. Back in 2009, I did one smart thing. I drafted a legal declaration of authorship for the spine, complete with a notarized timestamp and Raj's reluctant signature. I tucked it into a folder titled, Just in Case. I also kept a backup of the entire system, code, documentation, proprietary logic maps. I burned it to a hard drive, locked it in a fireproof box, and wrote the map on it in thick red Sharpie. I never talked about it again. Not to my lawyer friend, not even to my therapist. I told myself I was being paranoid. But now? Now I'm glad I trusted my instincts. because at 5 a.m., they thought they were ending me. Instead, they gave me the keys to everything they forgot I still owned. And this time, I wasn't going to be quiet. 3 days after the message, the one that simply said, "You're fired," my phone lit up again. But not with an apology or an explanation. No, this time it was headlines. Historic share acquisition. Orbis Corp secures largest investment in company history. They were everywhere. Tech sites, financial news, even a local segment on the morning show. Polished photos of smiling executives clinking champagne glasses. Press releases with phrases like visionary leadership, cutting-edge infrastructure, and unprecedented scalability. I stared at the photos for a long time. There was Raj, grinning like he hadn't burned through every favor I ever called in to make the deal happen. Julian, giving his signature half-smile, shaking hands with the Orbis Corp team, the same one I negotiated with for 9 months straight. I remembered the calls at midnight, the emergency budget overhauls, the weekend I spent rewriting the equity model from scratch because their legal advisor flagged one clause at the 11th hour. It had all been done through my system. The spine was the foundation for the valuation model they used. My logic flows processed every internal projection in those glossy pitch decks. Even the scheduling tool for their investor meeting? I built that too, during a sleepless 72-hour crunch. And my name? Not once. Not even buried in the fine print. The press releases praised the core engineering team. But I had been erased. Completely. Not by accident. This was surgical. Someone had gone to great lengths to ensure I wasn't even an afterthought. I thought maybe I could shrug it off. Tell myself I didn't need validation. That my worth wasn't defined by press mentions or photo ops. But I'd be lying. I scrolled through the gallery of images until my stomach twisted. I wasn't just excluded. I'd been scrubbed out of my own legacy. And that's when I got the letter. A plain white envelope, no return address, delivered through the mail like something from another time. Inside, thick ivory paper, typed in careful prose, signed in blue ink. Dear Miss Lozano, I write not as a formal representative today, but as someone who remembers. 16 years ago, you sat in a windowless room across from our grants committee with little more than a concept sketch, 3 spreadsheets, and a conviction so clear it startled us. You asked for $15,000. You built an empire. I saw the headlines today. I saw who was celebrated, and I noticed who wasn't. That's their loss. But not mine. Please accept this letter as a small, quiet acknowledgement. I remember. You made it all possible. Some of us never forgot. Sincerely, Anders Fielding Director, Whitestone Innovation Grant. I read it twice, then 3 more times. My hands trembled. It didn't undo the betrayal, but it anchored me. Someone remembered. Someone outside the glitter and the lies still saw the truth. The company had tried to write me out of the story, but the original author always keeps the real draft. And I still had the map. I should have seen it coming. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning. Subject line, Exciting Leadership Update. I opened it without thinking, halfway through a budget forecast for the Q3 rollout. We're thrilled to welcome Richard Vail as our new Chief Operating Officer. Richard brings over a decade of experience in strategic scaling, operational realignment, and culture transformation. He will be leading initiatives aimed at process optimization, structural cohesion, and performance clarity. Translation? Someone was about to swing a clean axe through everything we'd built. Richard showed up the next Monday, and everything about him said efficiency over empathy. He was young, 34, maybe 35, but moved with the smug confidence of someone who had never once failed publicly. His suits were tailored to the millimeter, his watch cost more than my first car, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. He introduced himself at the all-hands in the sleek auditorium on floor 17, standing under cool lighting with a latte-colored mic tucked to his jaw. "I'm not here to manage people," he said. "I'm here to liberate potential. My job is to make this machine move cleaner, faster, smarter." The team applauded. Someone behind me whispered, "He's got tech poster boy energy." I didn't laugh. Week 1. I was removed from the weekly ops sync, the very meeting I created when the company outgrew email chains. When I asked about it, I was told, "Richard is consolidating reporting lines. He'll loop you in if needed." Week 2. I lost edit access to the core financial dashboard, my dashboard. The one I coded from scratch, the one that drove our investor reports. My credentials returned an insufficient permission error. I flagged it. No one replied. By the end of month 1, I had a new nickname, Legacy Support. I watched it all unravel from the inside. My architecture still propped up every report they sent to shareholders, but my name was no longer on anything. My systems had been renamed in Jira tickets. LFS routing became Flow Tracker Pro, suggested by marketing, and every module I'd written was now refined by Garrett, an intern who once asked me what a compound annual growth rate was. I wish I could say I fought back, that I stormed into Richard's office and demanded to be seen. But truth? I didn't have the strength. You don't realize how corrosive being ignored can be. It doesn't strike like betrayal. It erodes, molecule by molecule, until one day you realize your voice has been muted and no one even noticed. Meetings I used to lead now started without me. I would see calendar invites appear and disappear like a cruel magic trick. Someone even replaced me on the stakeholder presentation for the Orbis Corp integration. I wasn't told. I found out when I walked past the glass boardroom and saw Garrett presenting my own slides. And the slides still had my design format. Down to the icons I created in Illustrator in 2013. I tried to hold on to something, dignity, relevance, maybe just a role. I offered to help train the new analytics lead. I shared insights. I stayed late. I answered emails at 1 a.m., even when no one replied. And still, Richard's approach was cold, methodical. I was a remnant, a file left open too long. "It's not personal," he said once in passing. "You're just from a different cycle." Different cycle. I became a shadow in my own office. Even my desk moved. I went from a corner view to a shared table beside the printer. Temporary restructuring, they said. But the silence wasn't temporary. It was terminal. My title remained on paper, but in practice, I had become surplus inventory. And the worst part wasn't being replaced. It was being rewritten. I found it by accident. I wasn't looking for memories. I'd stopped doing that. It hurt too much to remember the early days, before press releases and politics, when ideas were still raw and we built with our hands instead of budgets. But that evening, I was clearing out my old filing cabinet, one they'd reassigned to make space for the new sustainability intern. I opened the lowest drawer, the one I hadn't touched in years, and there it was. A yellowed envelope, faded handwriting, my name in blue ink, curving neatly across the front. Inside was a photo and a letter. The photo hit first. It was old, grainy, warm with the tint of time. I was 23, hair tied in a messy bun, oversized hoodie, laptop open. Julian stood beside me, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Raj was crouched on the floor, drawing a crude org chart on a napkin. We were in the original office, the one above the coffee shop where the lights flickered when the barista used the blender. I stared at it for a long time. That picture had been taken before we even had a company name. Then I unfolded the letter. It was dated October 12, 2008, a single sheet, thick paper, slightly crumpled, but the ink still clear. "Lola, this company would not exist without you. I can pitch, Raj can sell, but you build. You make things real. You take chaos and turn it into infrastructure. That's not talent, it's vision. One day, people will forget the titles and the meetings, but what you've built will still stand. Systems don't lie, and neither do I. Thank you. Not for what you've done, though that's already more than anyone else, but for what you're still going to do. Never let them forget who made this." Julian. My breath caught. I hadn't seen his handwriting in over a decade. Back then, Julian was the idealist. The one who believed startups could be families and spreadsheets could be sacred. He left the company in 2013, quietly, suddenly, said something about burnout, said he needed to recalibrate his soul. I never got the full story. After he left, Raj shifted the culture. Growth became God. The edges sharpened. Julian vanished from our narrative. But now, I had proof he hadn't forgotten me. That night, I Googled him. No social media, no press. But then I checked the Whitestone Innovation Foundation's advisory board, the same group that gave us our first grant. There he was. Julian M. Calver, Senior Ethics Advisor, Corporate Legacy and Impact Division. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. It wasn't just nostalgia anymore. It was connection. Julian remembered. Anders, the grant director, remembered. They were both still in positions of influence, and both outside the corporate machine that had tried to erase me. These weren't coincidences anymore. They were clues. I hadn't just built a system. I had left footprints. The company had erased my name from the files, but not from the facts. Somewhere beneath the PR smiles and stolen credit, the truth still pulsed, quiet, steady, waiting. And now I had more than a backup. I had a witness. They always assumed I was just the engineer, the builder behind the curtain, the one who made the machine run. But what they never understood, what they never even bothered to ask, was how I'd built it. Not just in code, in logic, in trust, in thresholds they couldn't fake. Back in 2011, when we were prepping for our first serious merger, I designed a safeguard. We didn't have a legal department then, just a friend of Julian's who'd read too many Reddit threads about digital forensics. But the one good idea that came from that paranoia-fueled week was the notion of a signature layer, something immutable, something human. I built it as a joke at first, a biometric key tied to retinal pattern and voice cadence. I called it the lock. The logic was simple. No major transfers, no stakeholder movements, no critical structural edits without the signature of at least one founding architect. Just in case. It stayed in the system, untouched for years. Buried. Forgotten. Until now. That morning, still buzzing from the letter and the memory of Julian's scrawl, I decided to check. I didn't expect it to still work. Not after all the rebranding, the audits, the layers of optimization Richard had rolled out. But it did. I used an old development tunnel, one of the side entrances they hadn't patched because they didn't even know it existed. My access lit up green. The system opened like it was exhaling, and there it was. Transaction request, 40% share transfer to Orbiscorp Tier 2 entity. Status, pending. Authorization, final biometric validation required. My throat went dry. They had executed every part of the acquisition, but couldn't complete the final transfer because the lock was still embedded, and only I could open it. A tiny camera blinked to life. A quiet ping confirmed my retinal scan. The voice prompt spoke next, mechanical and cold. Authorization required. Please confirm identity. I spoke slowly. Lola Mireille Lozano, Founder ID 011AX7. The system paused. Then, confirmed. 3 options appeared on screen. Confirm. Suspend. Cancel. Each line pulsed softly, like a heartbeat waiting for direction. I stared at them. Confirm meant finishing what they started, finalizing a transfer that would erase the last fingerprint I had on the company. Suspend meant playing for time, letting them think they still had a chance to sway me. But cancel meant burning the bridge, not with fire, but with precision, with a single, irrevocable no. I clicked cancel. The screen flickered. A warning appeared. This action is permanent. Please input security message for system log. I typed slowly, fingers steady. Access belongs to those who protect it. The terminal pulsed once more. Then the transfer record vanished. Status: aborted. In that moment, I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. I felt like the architect, and I had just locked the doors from the inside. Everything was designed to impress. The lighting was warm, low, expensive. The auditorium shimmered under strategic gold tints, designed to make suits look richer, smiles brighter, and ambition photogenic. Rows of investors sat poised like royalty, eyes alert with the anticipation of a lucrative future. The Orbiscorp team sat in the front row, relaxed but expectant, as if they already owned the place. Darren stood center stage, the picture of confidence. He wore the same navy suit he'd used in every press photo for the past year. Consistent branding, his assistant called it. Behind him, the massive digital screen pulsed with an animated spiral of the company's growth metrics. Green arrows, dollar signs, buzzwords like synergy and scaling velocity. Richard stood at the edge of the stage, arms folded, gaze fixed on the console like a general waiting to fire the final shot in a campaign. "And so," Darren said, voice swelling as the music crescendoed, "with this final transfer, we welcome a new chapter, a new partnership, the largest share transaction in our company's history." Polite applause. He walked to the floor console built into the stage, sleek, fingerprint-ready, connected directly to the proprietary backend I had built 16 years ago. He didn't hesitate. He pressed his thumb to the sensor, then tapped the screen once with an air of ceremonial finality. The room held its breath. Processing. Then the screen glitched. A flicker. A hiccup. 1 second passed. Then 2. Then the message appeared. Error. Authorization cancelled. User, Lola. The air shifted. The room didn't gasp all at once. No, it fractured in phases. Confused murmurs in the back. A tech consultant from Orbis Corp tilted his head. Someone near the AV booth leaned forward, whispering, "What does that mean?" Darren's smile cracked, then quickly returned, but less natural, like it was held in place by panic. He tapped again. Error. Authorization cancelled. User, Lola. Another flicker. A third message this time, centered in bold. Transfer blocked. Founding authorization required. Then, at the bottom, in a soft gray font, like a whisper on silk, access belongs to those who protect it. And just like that, everything froze. Darren stood paralyzed, fingers still hovering over the screen. Richard stormed forward from the side of the stage, whispering something sharp and angry. A systems engineer jogged down the aisle, tablet in hand, already sweating. Whispers turned into urgent phone calls. Someone tried to pull up the legal documentation on a tablet, but the internal network was lagging. And behind all the panic? Silence. The kind that fills a room just before it shatters. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, I sat in a cafe so quiet I could hear the hiss of milk frothing in the machine behind the counter. My laptop sat open, muted, showing the company live stream. No sound was needed. I could read every panic-induced movement like a symphony. I watched Darren's face pale. I watched Richard bark orders into a phone. I watched Orbis Corp's lead investor slowly close his binder and stand. And I didn't smile. Not out of bitterness or triumph, just clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was balance. This was gravity reclaiming what had been thrown off course. I stirred my tea. Chamomile and ginger. A little honey. No chaos, no emails. No fires to put out. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I didn't exist in service of their success. I didn't owe anyone an answer. And that error message? That was the truth. I had been made invisible. But now, my name was the only one that mattered. They had wiped it from reports, from slides, from conversations. But they couldn't wipe it from the foundation. Because the real foundation wasn't just code. It was trust. And they had broken it. Back in the auditorium, the screen faded to black. The lights came up, too bright now. Darren looked small beneath them, like a man waking from a dream to realize the floor beneath him was never real. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know what I would do next. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I was free. 3 days passed. Not a word from the company. No messages, no emails, no desperate calls begging for help or explanations. And that silence? It was louder than anything they could have said. They were in freefall. I saw it in the headlines. Unprecedented halt in share acquisition. Internal systems failure suspected. Orbis Corp shares plummet after technical catastrophe. Unnamed insider allegedly sabotages $400 million deal. Executive's mum. And still, nothing official from them. I wasn't surprised. What could they say? That the woman they fired by text at 5 a.m. turned out to be the architect of the one thing they couldn't replicate or control? Admitting that meant admitting everything. That they had buried me alive. That their shiny new leadership was standing on a foundation built by hands they tried to forget. So, they chose denial. Silence. And for the first time in 16 years, I chose peace. I stopped reading every article. I let go of the compulsive need to track the chaos. I turned off notifications and spent time doing things I hadn't allowed myself in years. I wandered used bookstores. I baked bread and burned the first loaf. I wrote terrible poetry in a journal I hadn't touched since college. I even laughed, once, when I burned my tongue on tea and swore like I was still 23. I thought I might feel restless. But I didn't. Not this time, because the fight was over. And I'd won. Not through revenge, not through destruction, but through restraint. Through refusal. Through clarity. And then, on a quiet Thursday morning, I opened my inbox just to delete spam, and saw it. No subject line, no dramatic headers, just a name, Anders Fielding. It felt like a knock on a door I hadn't opened in years. I clicked. Lola, we know it's you. We're not asking why. You don't owe us that. But we'd like to meet. No strings, no agenda, no PR spin. Just people, talking. You mattered then. You matter now. The headlines will move on, but what you did, what you built, doesn't vanish with the news cycle. It's not about code or control. It's about intention, integrity, quiet legacy. Let us buy you coffee. Or don't. You don't owe us anything. But in a world that forgets too fast, I wanted you to hear this. You're not forgotten. Anders. I didn't cry. Not immediately. I just sat there, reading it again and again. My hand on the mouse, the cursor hovering over the reply button I didn't press, because it wasn't about what I would say. It was about what they said. We know it's you. You mattered then. You matter now. No strings attached. That was the acknowledgement I'd never dared hope for. Not from the company, not from the people who took credit, but from someone who saw past all of it. Someone who remembered. I closed the laptop gently, almost reverently. There were no marching bands, no public statements, no stock bumps. Just a letter, just a person, seeing another person across time and scars and silence. And you know what? That was enough. We met at a quiet rooftop cafe overlooking the city skyline. No reporters, no contracts, no performances. Just Anders, a pot of herbal tea, and that same calm steadiness he'd always carried. Like the kind of man who remembers your name even when the world forgets your face. He stood when I arrived, offered his hand, then immediately pulled it back with a sheepish grin. Sorry, he said, still unlearning corporate reflexes. That made me smile, genuinely. We sat beneath an awning of twinkling lights, the hum of the city below us like distant applause. He didn't start with pleasantries. Didn't ask about the fallout or the headlines. He just looked at me with those kind eyes and said, "You look lighter." And I did. Not just in posture, but in presence. I had let go of something heavy. I was no longer chasing a place in someone else's system. I was no longer invisible in the house I'd built. After the tea was poured and the silence settled comfortably, he got to the point. "I don't want to build another echelon," he said. "God knows the world doesn't need more extraction machines pretending to be innovative. I want to create something different, something independent, something honest." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerously idealistic." He grinned. "Probably, but I've got people at the foundation who believe in it. People who watched what happened to you and said, 'Never again.' We want a new structure, transparent, ethical, something with bones you can see through." I didn't answer right away. I just watched him, weighing his face, his tone, his intent. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You wouldn't be a cog," he said. "You'd be the core, architect-level input, full autonomy. We don't want you to fix something broken. We want you to design it clean, from the start." I sipped my tea slowly. It sounded like a dream, the kind I'd buried years ago under spreadsheets and silent compromises. But even dreams come with terms. So I said, clearly and without pause, "No one from Echelon." He didn't flinch. "No former Echelon employee will be offered a role. Not on the build team. Not in advisory. Not even as a contractor. You have my word." The words settled like an anchor in my chest. Not because they were said, but because they were said without hesitation. That was trust. Not in theory. Not in sentiment, but in execution. He didn't ask me to explain the condition. Didn't question if it was personal or professional. He understood. Some structures rot so thoroughly you don't salvage the wood. You burn it to protect the forest. I looked out at the skyline, the familiar silhouettes of towers I once helped light from behind the curtain. I thought about what it would mean to build again, not as a ghost or a ghostwriter, but as a full presence. "What would we call it?" I asked, still half in awe that I was even considering it. Anders shrugged. "That's your department, but I was thinking something like transparency engine." I laughed. "That's awful." I said thinking, not committed. I sat back in my chair and let the idea bloom. A new system, not just in code, but in principle. No gatekeeping, no vanity titles, no invisible labor. I'd build the backbone again, but this time I wouldn't do it alone. I'd build it with people who didn't need to be convinced that integrity mattered. "I'll do it," I said. And it wasn't just an agreement. It was a rebirth. Starting over should have been terrifying. There were no glossy boardrooms, no catered meetings, no polished decks of buzzwords and projections. Just a small room in a shared workspace, 2 laptops, and a blank whiteboard with only one word written on it. Foundry. Not because we were forging steel, but because we were building something unshakable, something elemental, a new kind of foundation, transparent, ethical, and humane. And this time, I wasn't alone. The first to show up was Marissa, once a junior analyst at Echelon, long gone after Richard had buried her project under an NDA minefield. She walked in with her sleeves rolled up and a stack of paper sketches saying, "If we're doing this, I want in, but no suits and no performative values plastered on walls." Then came Eddie, my old systems guy, who once stayed up 3 nights in a row with me during the great server crash of 2014. He simply said, "Wherever you are, I trust the code." Even Anders sat on the floor one evening, cross-legged in dress pants, helping tape up process maps as if we were back in our early 20s. He didn't try to lead. He supported, like scaffolding. But the biggest surprise came a week later. The door opened mid-morning, and Julian walked in like no time had passed. He looked different, thinner, grayer, quieter, but the eyes were the same. The kind that didn't just see you, but listened to the parts you didn't say. "I heard you were back," he said, "and I thought it was time." I didn't ask what had kept him away so long. I didn't need to. He sat down, and in that gentle, careful way of his, said, "I left because I saw the rot early. Darren wasn't just a bad leader. He was corrosive. He had the kind of ambition that eats people. I tried to speak up. Raj dismissed me. The board ignored me." He looked around at the whiteboard, at the post-it notes, at the half-empty coffee mugs and quietly buzzing monitors. "But now, maybe we get to do it right." And he meant it. Not perfect. Not sanitized by committees or mission statements. Just right. We didn't start with org charts or titles. We started with rules. No hierarchy that doesn't serve a function. No hidden decisions. No more working until your health collapses. Credit belongs where it's due, no matter the title. Every piece of the system must be understandable by the people who use it. Simple, radical, ours. We met at odd hours, sketched on walls, broke up brainstorms with laughter and vulnerability. I saw people unfold from trauma into belief again. I saw talent shine without having to beg for space. I saw myself, not as a survivor of corporate erasure, but as a builder who never stopped creating, even when the scaffolding fell. And when the headlines started trickling out, when the media finally pieced together what really happened at Echelon, it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to get the story right, because I was already writing a new one. And this time, my name wouldn't be erased. It would be etched into every line of code, every policy, every choice, not as a banner, but as a reminder that we protect what we build, that silence doesn't equal surrender, that real power doesn't shout, it outlasts. And I was just getting started. The conference room was nothing grand, no chandeliers, no stage lighting, just brushed steel, warm sunlight, and the quiet weight of something real about to begin. The funding agreement lay before me, 30 pages of language refined by lawyers, marked by trust. The numbers were clear, the terms were fair, but that wasn't why my hands trembled slightly as I picked up the pen. It was because of what it meant, not a return, a resurrection, and this time, with witnesses. To my left sat Anders, smiling gently but saying nothing, as he always did in moments he knew didn't belong to him. Across the table, Julian nodded once, not as permission, but as recognition. A shared memory of what it took to reach this page. The others watched in stillness. Marissa, Eddie. The new team we had assembled not because of resumes, but because of heart. The kind of people who didn't just build systems, they built safety. And then, from the far end of the room, someone stood up. Garrett, the intern. The one who had once slapped his name on my work like it was free merchandise. The one who had watched me get buried and said nothing. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Before you sign," he said, voice shaking slightly, "I just want to say something." Everyone turned. "I was an idiot," he said. "I didn't understand what I was taking. I just followed orders. And when things started breaking, it wasn't the system. It was the silence that made it worse. I didn't protect anything." He looked at me directly. "But you did, and I see that now. Thank you for the lesson." There was no applause, just silence, the kind that holds space for growth. I nodded once, not with anger, not with pity, just acknowledgement. Sometimes people don't get it until after the fall. Sometimes redemption comes with truth. Then I turned back to the contract. I signed my name. Lola Murray Lozano. And beneath it, in clear, deliberate print, I added the phrase that would become more than a slogan. It would become our North Star. Build like no one can be erased.